Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear. I'm exploring a little canyon right now, and I've had this knife in my pocket today. It's been in my pocket a lot of days since I got it. I feel like I'm finally ready to do my full review on the Quietcarry Waypoint. Now, this knife is astounding to me. It's hard for me to believe how good it is. Now, I know this knife has a decent bit of buzz around it lately, and I've already made a few videos about it. I did an unboxing video with my first impressions. I did kind of a use update video talking about the things I'd put it through. I did a comparison video between it and the Spidey Chef, two corrosion resistance focused EDC knives. And then I did a actual like kind of torture test, if you will, on it. That was just yesterday. This video will go up in a few days, so yeah, timing might be funky here in terms of you watching this, but yeah, yesterday I put this knife through an apple. Not like I was testing edge retention at that point, but I wanted to test corrosion resistance because I've cut a lot with this knife and I've gotten it dirty and wet plenty of times, put it in my pocket wet, haven't had any corrosion. So I was like, what will happen if I just leave it with the apple juice all over it for a couple hours, right? So after an hour, there was just nothing happening and I was getting impatient. So I stuck it in a glass of lemonade for another hour, pulled it out, rinsed it off. Nothing happened. You can watch that video. It was fun. But I feel like now I've done enough testing on this for its corrosion resistance properties and its edge retention properties to make an actual concise review. It's very important to me, by the way, that I don't just review knives without using them and experiencing them. If I ever do that, it would be because it's like a borrowed knife, and I'll be very clear about that my experience with it is limited before I give you my opinions on it, because I think it's only fair that I actually test this before I kind of stand behind the words I say about it. Anywho, I've used this knife a lot. I've done a lot of cutting with it. I've put it through a bunch of cardboard. I used it on a big, like a cardboard craft project that I did last week, where I literally, I was cutting cardboard for half the day. And it was fantastic for that. It's been fantastic for every EDC task I've thrown at it. I've cut cord with it. I've tried feather sticking with it just for fun. I've put this knife through the ringer, and some people have said that this edge retention on Vanax is comparable, maybe slightly below. Some people say maybe slightly better than the steels like M390, 20CV, those kind of common super steel standards at this point. And I don't have real data to go behind to tell you whether it is or it isn't. But what I can say is I own and have owned plenty of knives in steels like M390, 20CV. And for me, with those steels, it's not like I'm putting edges on them all the time. The point of those steels is they have great edge retention, right? So I have been using this knife as much or more as I would any other knife that I carry for like 2 weeks now. And I've been intentionally trying to see if I could find any edge deformations, if it's rolled or chipped or anything like that, even if it's just gotten a dull spot, nothing. So I don't have real scientific data to tell you like how many feet of cardboard this will cut compared to 20 CV, or how many cuts through twisted sisal rope. Other people will do those tests, and I think that's great, and I'll keep an eye on them because I'm curious. But what I can say is, in my experience, this is not any less good at holding an edge than 20 CV or M390. To the layman like me, who's just using knives and enjoying them, and like super steels are fun and it's great, and I don't like having to sharpen my knives often, it's on par with those steels that people are comparing it to, in my experience. So as unscientific as that is, and I don't want to be too specific because people will jump down my throat if I'm saying it's as good or better or whatever. In my experience, it's every bit as good in terms of holding the edge that came on it compared to any M390 or 20 CV knife that I've ever gotten. In fact, I've had some M390 knives that I feel like when I've gotten to this amount of use on them, I've already needed to do a sharpening. And so a lot of that could be heat treat and whatever you want to call it. There's a lot more that goes into a steel than just the chemical construction. The heat treat, the grinding, all of that. But this knife seems to have done well on all those fronts, because in every bit of testing I've done, every bit of real use I've done, it's just been great. So yeah, I really, really like this knife. I also feel like with the amount of corrosion resistance testing that I've done on it, which has been fairly extensive, again, not scientific, this is just me trying to feel out the limits of the knife. I have not been able to get this knife to show any corrosion whatsoever, like none, zero. And I've put it in my pocket soaking wet, and then literally like pulled it out hours later to use it for something, just done this, and then cut whatever I was going to cut, put it back in my pocket. Like, it's spent days where it's been getting wet and dry and just like not caring about wiping it down. Nothing. I did that test where I left it in lemonade. Nothing. Could I potentially do something to this knife to get it to corrode? Like, maybe I was thinking if I like left it in mustard overnight or something. That's how people force patinas. Like, yeah, that might start to do something to it. It might not even. I don't know. Could I put it in ferric chloride and see if it does something to it? Maybe, sure, I don't know. Could I make like a saltwater concoction and leave it for a week? Yeah, I could do that kind of thing, but I'm not going to. At this point, I have sufficiently tested its level of corrosion resistance to be so confident in this knife. Like, I would not hesitate to have this knife in my pocket and jump into the ocean and get back out and not worry about like immediately pulling it out to dry it off because it's going to rust and I have to disassemble it. And no, I think this knife would be fine. The amount of times I've gotten it wet, the things I've done to it, there's no like real world application that I'm going to be in with this knife or I will worry 1% about it rusting. It's just not going to. It's done too well at everything I've tried to do to it for me to have any worry about that. So I call that what it is. I've even, side note, I've had knives with M390 or 20 CV blades in my pocket, like on a long hike or something where it's gotten really sweaty like this knife has, and it's just sitting in my sweaty, salty nastiness for a couple hours while I'm hiking, right? And I'll pull it out, the blade will be all wet, you can see all the condensation on it, and I've gotten rust spots on steels like those. This knife, I've been so much more intense on it and nothing has happened. So again, unscientific. This is the bearded gear way of just experiencing this knife and testing it out to my foreseeable limitations. But that being said, it has passed so much with flying colors. Now, something else I've said in other videos, but I think is worth repeating, is I bought this knife because of the steel. Vanax Superclean is really exciting to me. And as evidenced by the tests I just talked about, it's still really exciting to me because it's crushing it. But even though I bought this knife because it is right now the production knife that is available with that steel, and I happened to like it aesthetically, I think it's a cool design, but primarily the reason was because of that steel, I can now say if they offered this knife in another steel, I would still recommend it. Because this knife, as a knife, is just awesome. It's so good. I can't believe how great this knife carries. This wire clip, fantastic. Any pair of pants I've put it in. I've put it in thick denim. I'm wearing Dickies shorts today. I had it in slacks one time. It looks nice. I think this knife looks plenty classy. If I'm wearing this with a suit, it doesn't seem out of place, but I have it out here outdoors on a hike today. It's the knife that's in my pocket and it's just doing great. I feel like it also doesn't feel out of place pulling it out here. It's a solid construction. The ergos on it work fantastically well for me, like so good. One of the better ergonomic knives, especially for its size, that I've ever had. I like that it's a liner lock and not a frame lock because this scale feels better in my hand than a frame lock typically would. There's no cut over here or anything. It just feels really solid and really well put together. This action on the washers, it's one of the best, if not the best, thumb stud knives for my preferences that I've ever owned and played with. And it's a great thumb stud deployment with a super crisp, really great detent. It's really well dialed in. The tolerances all feel really tight. I love how thin it is. This knife carries, I mean, it is so close to carrying as good as my Benchmade Bug Out, which is like my perfect carry knife in terms of how it feels in pocket. That knife is thin, it is light, doesn't have any weird extremities to it, it's deep carry, and it's fantastic. This knife isn't that much heavier than a bug out. It's got about as much blade length as a bug out, about as like kind of a similar blade profile to a bug out. The footprint of it is, if it's bigger than a bug out, I find that hard to believe. I mean, this knife carries so small and so light. I think this knife is sub 3 ounces, if I'm remembering the stats correctly. The bug out's like sub 2 ounces, which is crazy. But this knife is not heavy, not at all. And so for it to be as solid as it is, the bug out does not feel anywhere near this solid. Not even close. Like, it is worlds more solid than a bug out feels in hand. And that's why the bug out's so light, sure. But I think there's certainly an argument to be made that this carries, I mean, it's so close to as good as the bug out, and it's so much more knife. This is so much more knife to have in your pocket for having the same amount of like profile, and to also be lightweight, and to carry nice and deep, and to look as good as it does. I mean, obviously this costs like 2.5 bug outs. It's the price is very different, but you're getting a lot more materials. And yeah, I've been astounded by how well this knife carries. So I don't want to ramble too much about this knife. I've already said a lot about it in other videos, but let me just say, ergos are a win. Absolute win in my book. I love this knife ergonomically. The way it carries, absolute dream. It's fantastic. One of the best knives I have in pocket. Its cutting ability. This blade grind is phenomenal for cutting. The edge that came on mine is perfect. The bevels are even. It's stupid sharp. It has stayed stupid sharp. It's obviously incredible material. We've talked about that. Its ability as a cutting tool, just off the charts great. I really, really love it. Yeah, fit and finish, fantastic. There's nothing about this knife that doesn't seem deliberate, that doesn't feel well finished. There's no hot spots, no sharp corners. Everything about it, incredible. I think that's pretty much everything. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything. If I am, I'm sorry. But my point is that this knife is like a 9 out of 10. And the only reason it's not a 10 out of 10 is because, like, I don't know, maybe it should be a 10 out of 10. I just struggle to score things perfectly. For its designed purpose, it just checks all the boxes. It does incredibly well at everything it's designed to do, and I've been nothing but impressed with it. So as long as you like the ergos of this knife, I don't know really much else what you could complain about it. There's not too much about this that I feel like is based on my preference other than the way it feels in hand. Yeah, I mean, I'm just so sold on this knife, and I can't recommend it enough. I've already recommended it to a bunch of people. I've had a few friends buy them since I've started making videos on mine. Everyone seems to have liked it. I'm going to be sending this to at least one buddy for him to check out. I think Quietcarry is also releasing some of these in other colors. They've been doing coatings. He's hinted that I might even do like some other handle materials or something like that. So this seems to be just the beginning of this knife, and rightfully so. I think this should be his flagship model. This knife just wins in my book. I really, really, really like the Quietcarry Waypoint. Makes me want to try more knives from him too, because this is my first Quietcarry, and I have been nothing but impressed. So that'll be that. I guess I'll turn the camera around real quick, just do a fast little pan over with the front facing camera and show you in detail this knife a little bit one last time. And yeah, even though I'm done reviewing this knife, it's going to be in pocket a whole lot more still. I'm not done carrying it. So let me turn you around. All right, so here it is in all of its glory. I have noticed this satin finish. I always get this smudge mark here. I think that's from just the way I deploy it. My thumb kind of glides across that a little bit. Sorry, that's out of focus. But yeah, that satin looks fantastic. You can see even after my torture test yesterday, there is no evidence of corrosion on there anywhere. Absolutely zero. We've got the LC200N liner in there. As I mentioned, I love that this is a liner lock and not a frame lock. I feel like there's been such an emphasis on frame locks lately. I think people equate frame lock with higher value than liner lock, but a really well done liner lock like this one, I almost prefer to a frame lock. Don't get me wrong, I love frame locks as well, but man, this is well dialed. I like the very simple design, just these little 4 dots on either side. That's kind of the signature of Quietcarry there. This wire clip, in my opinion, looks great, and it functions so well. All the hardware on here looks nice, works nice. Backspacer, super well dialed, fits great, looks great. I just, yeah, I can't speak highly enough of this knife. It works and looks and feels so good. I'm really glad I went with the Bead Blast finish. I like this finish. The only wear on the finish is right under the pocket clip. I don't know if you can see, there's a little scuff where it's just kind of, this pocket clip has slid back and forth a couple of times. I assume while I've been hiking is when that's happened, because I've literally like scrambled up some pretty serious rock faces with this in my pocket. Yeah, that's the only wear on the finish after carrying and using this extensively for a couple of weeks now. And I don't mean just like carrying it to an office job and then sitting in a chair with it. I've been really carrying and using this knife. So there it is. That's the Quietcarry Waypoint. Hopefully you like it as much as I do, because I freaking love this knife.